The studio that we're in right now was actually our very first, opened in 2018. And the success of this place started us on quite the journey. And now we operate in 20 assets. And the team studio has kind of all of those dimensions represented. So we have design and construction, we have leasing, we have marketing, all of these competencies that are necessary in order to create new spaces like this. So that's my team.
Lovely folks, thank you for having us. My name is Noam Bacharach. I lead operations and employee experience for Weeks.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm a program manager on our people experience team at Greenhouse.
Hi everybody, my name is Jamie Adasi. I get to head up our global idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, allyship, and people experience team, and Rachel also leads the authority team as well. Nice to see you all. I've been with Greenhouse for about 4 years now.
Hi everyone, my name is Kirschner. I'm a senior expert in McKinsey's real estate people practices. I lead we're thinking on the future of the physical workplace and the associate employee experience and kind of hybrids here. Oh no, what do we do? As it pertains to this place, I guess I joined McKinsey a couple years ago by way of the workplace strategy practice at WeWork, so I come from co-working as well, and really excited about that. That they do both.
Andreas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show up everywhere.
So we'll start with Jill. We recently had a really interesting article talking about how to create high-performing visually be in a hybrid flex environment. What are the key ingredients that you could say?
Yeah, sure.
Interesting to share.
So as they look, so I got really sick of getting asked the question over and over again, like, how many days should people be in? Or ludicrous things like, what percentage of my place will quit until we'll be back here, and what's the average cost per square foot for the perfect hybrid environment? Ridiculous question. Those like people will ask. But I said there sort of has to be a better way, and got really interested in fully remote companies, because while all of us like hem and haw in the middle of a hybrid, like you could be like a carbon copy of me, working for the same company, same job, same everything, but we have like two different bosses. And one of us has a terrible experience, the other has a great experience, right? And like, therefore, our hybrid experience is different. There is no perfect hybrid, perfect balance. It's like trying to figure out the exact balance of like, when should I shop at the Gap or like buy online? It's so situational. But you can study the fully remote companies, not just the ones who are remote now because of COVID, the ones who have been remote by choice since before the pandemic. And we applied something called McKinsey's Organizational Health Index. It's probably our oldest and most distinctive asset. It is not an engagement survey. It basically shines a light on how the organization runs itself, looks at the choices we make in our work practices, not like, do I trust my leaders, but do I see certain behaviors? Do we have a clarity for roles? Do we look outside for our customers? Do we share knowledge? And we've been doing it for so long with so many thousands of companies, we can actually demonstrate or correlate higher organizational health to higher business performance. And that's the thing that everyone else struggles to do, workplace surveys and legion surveys. Either really engaged or happy workers and terrible actual financial performance of the company. So we pointed this big instrument that had been used for 20 years now with a big, stodgy, boring companies without a single question in it about workplace. Not one. And we put a couple fully remote companies through it, the most notable which is GitLab. Is that right? 2,000 people, public. Like anyone who had to read anything about remote work during hybrid saw something written by GitLab. They were best. Took them through this instrument, and surprise to everybody, they outperformed basically 95% of the companies that McKinsey had ever seen. They think of like the big companies, right? And that was really eye-opening. So we learned a couple things from that. Like when you take the place out of the equation, there are a couple of particular management practices that we have found through GitLab and studying other fully remote or remote companies that show the same qualities, do different things, but because they're in this extreme distributed environment, there are things that they do well that normal companies don't. we all talk about that we want to, but they don't. Things like institutional knowledge sharing, institutional like culture of writing things down, all process-based capabilities. You do the same with regardless of the extreme clarity about your role, extreme clarity about performing choices, and two very particular leadership styles. One sort of more supportive, like a care for your well-being. One that's very consultative in how to do it as well, which is to say not the authoritarian, top-down, you should do it this way. That just doesn't work. So I encourage you to look at the report for that, because it's like almost every large normal company is going to go hybrid, but there's a lot we can learn from the fully remote set about those mindshare qualities. And the one other thing I'll say, inspired by that, we started asking a select number of questions about location flexibility and choices through the OHI survey into big normal companies. And he answered a wide survey of different people from different companies with these name questions, inspired by the results from GitLab and others. We found that if you give someone choice, where and when to work, basic flexibility, those people are about 1.5 times more likely to report positive outcomes for the company. Better strategic direction, more innovative, I'm more motivated to work. And that's good. But if you give someone a reason why they have to be somewhere, I want you to be in, here's why, treat me like an adult, don't just tell me. It goes from about a 1.5 multiplier to like 2.5, so it's more powerful to just make sure that I understand why I have to be somewhere than to tell me I have a choice. But the icing on the cake comes back to those work practices. For people who say that their teams have clear working norms, you are 3.5, if not 4 times more likely to report positive outcomes on the same. So give someone choice, great. But if they actually have robust ways of working, it is the most powerful tool to be daily during COVID, which is why the fully remote companies outperform the rest of us, because they're good at it. And most of our employers just say it's easier for me to tell you to be here all the time than to have to fix how we do all that.
Yeah. Wine. Yes. Amazing. Jamie, I think it actually, I saw you nodding, and it's really how, so knows what I was saying. How is diversity and inclusion coming based on the need of choice from the empower flexibility? We shall live up our best role model for right that in workplace. So what changes are you saying about?
So yeah, I've seen a lot of changes. Now I actually want to talk about some data to build my race, I would say, that talks about that, what potentially you're talking about, schedule, flexibility. But let me just say, I started at Greenhouse March 2020, March 10th. Wow. Gosh. The first week of the global shutdown. I moved from Denver to New York for the job. It's ready to be fully in person. At the time, about 90% of employees work out of an office of some sort. So Greenhouse, we operate right now across the U.S., but at the time we had SF office, Denver office, New York headquarters, and then we had an office in Ireland, in Dublin. And so when I started that first week, it's like, okay, let's try this out, figure out what's going on. Kelly, you were there.
I was there.
You know, these holes, this is so wild. And so now, 4 years into the life post-COVID, we are about 30% of employees who live, I wasn't live or work near our headquarters in New York, which is the one remaining office that we still have right now. So that is a big drastic difference. And so we are actually fully remote, fully distributed, but with the option to go into spaces. And so Gable actually helps us with that as we can manage and set our spaces. But when I think about our strategy and how things have changed around DE&I over the last several years, probably 4 areas, but they all live under our distributed policy work that we've been doing. Number one, of course, recruiting. Immediately, if you're trying to, recruit more diverse individuals, being able to open up outside of the spaces by office, that will give you more access completely quickly. I'll give you an example of an outcome there. When I first started at Greenhouse, we were about 5 to 10% people of color on our executive team. So majority of our executive was white. Now we're about 40% people of color. My own boss, who is our chief people officer, he's based out of Atlanta, black man. Like, I don't know if he would have moved to New York for the role, but he operates out of Atlanta and it's fine. So I think just number one, being able to increase access to diverse individuals outside of just major city hubs was immediately a win for us. Another area I would want to highlight too would be around just remote flexibility that you're talking about. So let me get into one thing. So looking at, it was a study that Future Forum did back in 2022, that's the last one that I have, but that's published. They look at the percentage of U.S. workers who want flexibility in where they work by race, ethnicity. About 87% of our Asian and Islander folks want that remote flexibility. About 80% of Hispanic, Black, and white people as well are looking for remote flexibility in their jobs. Additionally, when you think about the preferring, people we prefer having no constraints on scheduling their time, being able to move and work whenever they want to. We see similar outcomes with over about 64 to 70% of these different racial groups saying that they want to be able to have flexibility in how they schedule their time even. And so there's a lot of outcomes there too. I think about people who are caregivers. I am 7 months pregnant, getting ready to have a child. Just not having to be in an office space always, and just having the access when I need to have it, so I can take care of these at home. Like that's a big win for us. So, and also being able to move around. I lived in New York for 2 years. I was able to literally move to Maryland a couple years ago with my role still intact because we are about 100% remote. So you get to keep people longer as well. There's so many different DEI aspects when I think about women in the workplace, how we're managing performance management. Now that we're 100% remote, you have to think about equity and fairness and who has access to what execs, et cetera, all the way down to our people connection strategy, which Rachel is a huge asset on to help us with our employee experience events, all the way down to how we activate people by region, based on where they are in the U.S. and abroad. So there's a lot that I would say relates back to DEI. Those are some of them, and I can get into more examples as we get this panel.
And they share a typically segues to ask you, how is the industry, how in Scotland when work is experience elections, do you have such the most, they're listed the most workforce, basically a 100% population sphere everywhere. What you can share about program, the challenges in the work success?
Totally. It has been a roller coaster, I won't lie. I've been with Greenhouse for 2 years, and when I started, a big part of my role was closing down our offices to transition us over to fully distributed. And so once I got through the massive undertaking of closing 4 offices, I was able to dive back into our people experience, which has been really great. We actually recently combined teams, yes. So now our DE&I team is combined with our people experience team.
It's also
really unique. And we are a mega super dream team, in my opinion. I think we do a great job together.
Excellent job.
But I've learned a lot of just like lessons along the way on how to incorporate all of the amazing work that you are doing into the events that I'm trying to organize. I think the partnership has really been so powerful. So that was a huge step, or a huge tip, I would say. A big thing that we've done is we've cast a really wide net of types of events. So we have tons of virtual events and in-person events. We have employee-led events. We have events that are facilitated by us. We're kind of just trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, to be honest, and see what resonates with employees, what doesn't. A couple of my favorite events that we've done, so in local communities where we have 5, 10, 15 employees, we'll bring them all together to do a speed networking event. And this gives them an opportunity just to have FaceTime, get to know one another, and it's a really easy icebreaker sort of event. And then from there, hopefully they'll develop connections and come together and have happy hours in there, or whatever. They'll come together for to watch the big final sports game. There's a lot of opportunities for them to connect. But we like to just create that intro in a really natural way. We also have really cool events that are virtual where we come together and do a storytelling event. It's sort of our take on the moth, if anyone's familiar with that. We ask questions and encourage people to share sort of a little bit more vulnerable and heartfelt stories with one another, and that forms really organic connections. And then we have a couple other practices with our events that I think are really helpful. Number one, we try really hard to have someone from our executive leadership team or our senior leadership team at every single event. And that's huge. It sets the tone. It makes people feel incentivized to go and attend, to meet with their senior leaders. But then also, they see their senior leaders engaging in these, vulnerable conversations and trying to connect. It helps sort of trickle down that same energy, which I think is really special. And then something else we've learned is following up with people after they've attended an event, whether it's virtual or in person. We throw them all together in a Slack channel and say, like, hey, y'all just had an amazing time together. Here's how to find each other in a fully distributed company. And we find that that also really helps people build connection. So those are some of just like things along the way that we've been learning, but it's definitely a work in progress.
It's not, and it's really cool. One that very the iterative focus to actually really cost the self and the sector. I would say there is a lot of the big gap as well on following that down to the core. It will help which we see quite a lot. Like there is CDD 320 in the public about experimenting in general, but the experimental phase in the month links with like we spread the icon and there on the site. No, I'm sorry, you're not on stage channel piece. What do you get? Me like doesn't know then she all that we said another one. And I think one of the was to me one of the and I know also is, part of babies having been in partially or accompanying a lot of it is there was a lot of people office culture and I'm sure right now there is like transitions and I know the two things where can transition was highly influenced by so when you can tell a little bit about like the process to do that, what were the challenges and maybe the ability to speak mention.
So thanks for the question and the framing of it, because I would say that every describing where we are right now and where we want to be and where we were has to go through the fact that we are a company that is headquartered in Israel with a very particular set of cultures and values that resonates to what we do here, and they always have. One of my earliest, so I joined May 2020. So I didn't have, I was thinking about your story, like maybe you left your recently received laptop and had to go back to take it like 3 months afterwards or something. So I started, from home, took on this role, and we were trying to fight through what to do with the whole COVID situation, obviously, going back to office. There was immense pressure from headquarters in Tel Aviv to get people back to the office. And it came not because of the perception that this is what needs to happen, rather than the feedback received from employees that they want that over there, which is real and genuine. People actually really want it. So I work in the operations side, work-based experience. A lot of the effort was, okay, how can we come up with innovative, creative solutions to accommodate to the many restrictions and keeping everyone healthy and safe and everything. And the Israeli innovative mind came to play, but it was so foreign to the experience here. And I'm starting my response in telling this story because one of the first things that needed to happen, and I kind of realized it along the way, is to educate ourselves upwards, sideways, downwards, just to help create some kind of a common language on what is what's relevant, what's right for the local team. Fast forward in time, now we're in a world where in our headquarters, by the way, we have over 5,000 employees globally, around 3,000 of them are in Israel. We opened a new campus in Israel, our headquarters, and through that process, there was a new policy that was introduced, essentially bringing everyone back to the office. I give credit to the leadership team of Wix that at that time, through the process that went through together, they managed to acknowledge the differences between the cultures and the needs. And what that means for us is that right now we're in a semi-hybrid, some flavors somewhere, some remote, a little bit of in-office. You have, if you ask 10 people, you get 12 answers on what working one ways. And I quote what you just said. I think it's a lot of touch and go, experimental, try to see what works for us. And happy to report that what we're seeing is that in the relevant areas, we're starting to see some kind of an organic emergence of behavior and some kind of a working model that, in a way, we allowed it to kind of like develop from itself through the opportunities that you provide to the employees, the environment that you create, and some also expectations that we generate.
And there's also important communication and expectation heritage. Is very good when you are speaking and a lot of team globally. I think that's also one of, I would say, challenges, I think, and opportunities. So you do have different cultures that work in different work modes. How does the work-life strategy actually works for all of them? Expanding means that it's not one size fits all. So trying Nate, so you're managing now when patients 6 years ago in that one clearly that means that there's a huge rise in demand for flexibility. When you see it in trade, you see it instead of going to traditional answers, going to that flexible work, let's say. What would you advise currently, when they decide to choose whether it's going to that SNAN or its additional partners? And follow us with when you will open the SNAN first, or the SNAN, what will you have in mind if we use that?
Sure. One of the interesting parts about our vantage point, because we offer everything in real estate, right? From an individual hot desk to if you're a company that needs us to build you a 1 million square foot office tower just for you on Park Avenue, we do everything. But we also believe that gives us the credibility to talk about the different needs that different companies have, and there's no one size fits all. So the point about there's no silver bullet solution for companies in choosing hybrid. There's also now so much choice and variety in terms of shared workspaces, in terms of sort of the continuum of everything from spaces like this, which are co-working. In the studio portfolio, we also have private workspaces, so 5,000 square foot office suites that might be elsewhere in this building, but that have access to these amenities. We have meeting and conferencing spaces because there's a lot of companies now which don't have room to get all of their employees in one space, and a couple times a quarter maybe they need to do that. So I really encourage everyone in thinking about this decision. It's not an either or, it's not a black and white, it's not traditional like, I have to sign a 20-year lease on an office space or go to a co-working space and all the co-working spaces are the same. There's so much right. It's actually why companies like Gable are so important to be able to put all of these options in one place and give companies the ability to try. We love Gable for people being able to come and try and experience our spaces and learn, this feels really different than some of the other operators or providers. And one of the reasons it feels different is now that there's this, real sea change in commercial real estate, understanding the role that flex is going to play for the long term in office, there's a segmentation now, an understanding of people are willing to pay at different price points that make sense, and they also want to be part of different companies and spaces for different reasons. Like, with Studio and Tishman Speyer, one of the things that we talk about really leaning into and specializing in is the concept that absolute flexibility is the name of the game, right? We don't want to make companies committed to anything more than makes sense for them in their decision-making frame, but we want that customer for life. So we want to be able to start a long-term partnership where you feel so excited about being within our operational family and our ecosystem that you might move from this co-working space to a private office. You might grow to be a full floor one day. Maybe you need us to build a warehouse for you, and really changing that model of how a big commercial real estate company can serve the varying needs of individual companies. And I know a lot of other co-working providers are kind of a little bit more thinking more about flexibility as like, come in, come out, you leave the office at 5 p.m. one day and the next time there's somebody else that comes in, but we very much want to create long-term relationships with people. Oh, and you asked me my second question around design. So, so we have really, one of the interesting challenges, the competencies that you have to build in order to be able to do this work correctly is the financing and underwriting part. So when you design a space like this, you're asking some investor for millions of dollars, and promising them that we know exactly how to sort of lay everything out, right? And I think for a long time, co-working spaces looked a certain way. There was sort of like, oh yeah, eight-person office and just, rinse and repeat, build a whole space with that. And where we've really invested is understanding from a data perspective, from usage, occupancy, seeing how people use all of our existing spaces, and really continuing to invest to create these very tailored spaces to the kind of market that you're in. Is it, central business district? Is it part of a residential building? And some of the most exciting spaces, the next space that we had, which will open up in July, is a combination of a co-working space, but also a big event space with a nice big terrace, and it fits into this big ecosystem, and it looks unlike any other space that we've created. And we're really committed to continuing to not just treat it as like, oh yeah, build out a floor, looks exactly the same, but to really treat each one as individually crafted.
Men about like more about the brands and how it's becoming a shape filler, say, and maybe you are just very shady scene. And now this is something to see all the time that the food fries, yes. If you were a investor and you would place it in an amazing companies, and now in a startup 70 large, 70 small, I think it's really interesting to see that we'd love to hear from the differences that she's seen in it working in a larger company, having different resources, how do you fly, in large pack, so it's smaller companies, what was, bigger than interesting, kind of exciting with the customer. And that,
so it was a large company, not as large as some of it is here, but we very much needed the execs wanted a very finite, well-defined, policy. And that was tough because you can't meet people where they are. A lot of this has been talking about flexibility and let people do virtual events if that's what they want to do, or let them meet in person, let teams work how they want to work. And that became a friction. And on me, who wants to come back to the office? Managers wanted their people to come back to the office, but when you ask the people, they weren't interested in coming back. So it was an interesting thing of trying to find certainty and have people come back when they might not want to, they might not need to. Their teams are all remote, so they're showing up at an office and they don't know anyone. And that was partially exacerbated by through the pandemic, where we went remote, or we had that clearly in office, and so people all of a sudden didn't know each other's faces. And when I had moved to a smaller company, it was wild. It was the first time I sort of pitched. It was actually my first little program that had started with Gable, and I pitched it. I had slide deck, and they were like, "What do you don't need that." And I got a full after the meeting take it "No, you don't need that here. We're a startup." I was like, "Okay, I will do slides before." I had data, I had spreadsheets, it's great. But we it ended up being over coffee. Someone was like, "Yeah, go ahead. That sounds cool. Go ahead and put that out." And it was a simple Slack message. And so the mentality of actually changing how I worked, how I socialized things, was really big. That was probably the biggest shift. And the flexibility for us to be able to, that I was able to say, I just want to try this. I just want to see how this goes. It's much easier at a 200-person company than at a 1,500-person company, where, some people are going to like the thing you did, and you're going to get just this blowback, this reaction with people. So it's been very fun at a smaller place. Everyone is, there's been so many changes. Everyone's yeah, that sounds cool, let's try it. And it's pretty fun. And they were actually, there was no office until 2021. The entire culture right there young. So the shifting of having a space, people are still excited about having a space. And one of the ways that I've been really trying to socialize, is spending money on travel, makes sense. Let people go and see their teams in person, especially when they first start. Let them build a connection, which means they'll be more excited to see each other in person or virtual later. I think the actual churn of employees, if people have a stronger connection, have seen each other physically, in an office or any location, they're more likely to stay for a longer period of time. So there might be a slide deck now about that. But that's been probably like my big push, where there's no way at a bigger company will, and also it depends so much on the executive team. Like that would have not been something that would have been, like no one would really even like considered that. Like the exec team probably would have been like, no, this is going to shut down pretty hard, just because the cost of that, when they already had a large real estate portfolio that we were trying to wrangle at that point. But I think here it is open to these ideas, open to trying to change something, which has been really cool, and been able to meet people how they want to work. Like we have a designer who moved to I think he's like living in Joshua Tree, like he's in the middle of nowhere. He was in Denver and never once went to a Gable. Like he never once did, even though people tried to push him into it. And then there's other people who crave that connection, and they're showing up all the time. And it's just interesting to see how people want it to happen. But he loves coming to San Francisco and New York offices. So he will come to a destination, but doesn't want to like commute day to day. And so like he's not going to, like, let's just move the budget. He doesn't want to go into a co-working, so let's get him into like another space. And I think he's super cool, so it works out. But that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is just let teams and people kind of find their mode of work, their style, and get together. And it is interesting that our engineering teams have had the hardest time kind of norming amongst teams and like what they want to do. So that's been an interesting one, because generally I've found that engineers have like these really tight connections and like sort of like form little covens and like plan stuff out, and then they're like, here's what we're gonna do. We're like, okay, go ahead. So it's been interesting to see just different teams, how they work, and different leadership, and their priorities and how that kind of like shuffles into their hiring trends. So there's been so many to go on.
It's been fun. It's great. So one of the things that you increased a little bit, like at the beginning, meant pivot, right? Like a lot of companies that's like, I need to wait, right? Work is what we see. Yeah. It's developing that goes to how it. Can you, like, if you look points, three things that will make a hybrid content successful? Hopefully, there's the code purpose and this, but what do you think will make some sort of a hybrid configuration?
Cool. Like it's like, first of all, we were all hybrid before. We should never said that. Period. Yeah, I remember having to prove, gosh, close to 2 years ago now, as a practitioner. I used to work at Credit Suisse. Funny story about my background, that like Credit Suisse went down before we were. That's the lottery ticket in number block. But even back then, the started in 2010, almost 40% of a bank with 60,000 employees had a direct manager in a different country than that. Country then. Never. We're like, you're hired. Like, you're just, that's not. Anyway, I say a lot like, there is not going to be a fixed answer to a flexible problem. We are not going to be assured that you will be where you think you are with the people that you think you're going to be. The barrier to not be there is just too low now. And my trouble in the word hybrid is it carries no intention about how you work. It's just kind of like, we're confused. And so the thing, the tension I think we have to hold is two things. One, like we've got to reimagine and improve how we actually do the work. Right? The way we were working before wasn't working. Anyone who says like meetings were better and apprenticeship was better in the office before probably A, looks like me, and B, was talking about someone who looks like me. Yes, right? And like, we ripped the Band-Aid and now you cannot unsee stuff that was true before but is like research backed and true now. McKinsey's own Women in the Workplace report says, right, like women are 1.5 times more likely to experience microaggressions in the built environment because dudes are awful. And like that was true then. It's just like super true now. So everyone's like, we should go back because it's better. Not better. So we've got to fix how we work, and make better places for the places where we work. Like when we are together, whether it's our office or someone else's place. But like our offices were also miserable before. Awful. A, we weren't there. B, like almost nobody ever asked what we thought, because if you did, you couldn't do anything about it. But we never just like it ever surveyed employees before. Probably the largest global set independent pre-COVID was Leasman. With them right there, we said like if you ask anyone in a normal workplace anywhere around the world, do you think your workplace enables you to work productively? The answer was like yes for maybe 60% of global knowledge workers. The second we went home, that number jumped to about 85%. That's the drive. The office wasn't great, but home's about. So the recommendation is like, again, there isn't going to be a fixed answer. If you're doing numbers math of this many percentage of people, this time work remote, and this many desks, like, it's a fool's errand. It will change during the day while you're doing the math. So just embrace that reality. It's not going to be, we can't do traditional change management the old way, like from point B to B. It's just a change mindset now, and congrats. The people at Gap, who's mentioned before, like are trying to be like, and Phil wants exactly this sweater once and forever. Like our retail boundaries change. We're making retail-oriented decisions about work. So you just have to embrace it. Know that you can't give up on the work in addition to not giving up on the place. And just hope that some of the people who are holding out like will die or retire one day, and the people who are more higher evolved humans in their markets will take over and we can get on with it. These are the things I would say. That's
But I don't Jamie, one of the things that's been mentioned is also like surveying and results. How everyone understand what this actually want. People need to know what they're about. How you do this? Sure, you luckily already about this. So what is the action item to get employees actual feedback, and then how do you follow this up? What do you do with their opposite voice?
That's a great question. So first of all, like many other places, we called out, it's the employee voice survey. It's changed names, changed cadence throughout the years, but right now we do basically one big survey in Q1. That's like lots of questions, and then we do pulse surveys in between, and at the end of the year we come back with another big survey. And so we just did our Q1 survey. We actually, for the first time in a while, we added specific questions to our co-working options into that survey. Before we had things like, do you have the tools you need to be able to be successful in your role, something like that, with the very broad, but we really want to understand how you would feel about our co-working style, as well as things around like our ERGs, our employee resource groups, so they help you to get connected, things of that nature. So I will say you do the surveys, but what we do after that is follow-up. So most recently we used to have something called culture committees. Partner with Cameron at Greenhouse. We had location-based culture committees. We had a global culture committee as well. And those would be folks who kind of self-select themselves in to help us bring it together and have fun in different areas. Those have now gone away due to employee feedback. We actually had a focus group, was it 2 months ago, usual? Yeah. We brought people together from all of our different offices and different spaces and said, what do you all need out of connection? We've seen some results from the survey, but like, let's go a little bit deeper here, really get the qualitative pieces of your experience. And so actually from that, we were able to create what Rachel was talking about earlier, kind of new employee groups. We can call them Ps, pods, and packs.
Yep.
So the packs are the bigger groups. The pods are the middle kind of size groups, and the Ps are like a 5 or less in an area. It's all
We love a vegetable
Me
pun.
too.
Agree.
So that came from the survey mechanism and then follow-up with the focus groups and like really not just gathering data, but listing to like what can we do to make things better. People also wanted more access to our executives. They're like, look, we're 100% remote, but we don't see our leaders in real life. And so what does that look like for us for advancement opportunities? And so we've actually, just today, I sent out a blog that both Leah on my team and then Rachel did together talking about this new strategy for connection and literally asking our executives, all of our managers, you need to let us know when you're at X, Y, and Z location. Here's where we're going to be. Here's all the events happening for the year. We need you to come and actually show up. Talk to your teams about showing up as well in person for these events when they can. Connect with people who are in smaller areas who you don't get as much love from us. So it's a very collaborative process when it comes to focus groups and surveys in general. We don't like to survey a survey. You don't want to survey to make sustainable action that helps people.
Decidedly. I think one of also referring to, which is before it's a stability, right? You said that you really talk about so time, and this is also about the design space of it. But normally, like, I was visited in Midway. One of the things that stood out to me, and you mentioned like how do you create like stability in the work arrangements, ways that people really want different types of spaces. We actually surveyed within survey, have said that basically hybrid offers 50% of the time in Midway. Like ways to contextually smaller, larger, and so on. So how do you create flexible environments, right? Yeah, for the next space.
It's a very good question, and I'll answer, and I'll say the first thing is what I ended up deciding what I'm not going to do. And I was very open about that to my customers, which are the employees and you know, the teams and leaders. And I told them that I am not here to cater every single need that they have. And I said it smiling. I wasn't like a jerk about it. But the reason being is that I went through a journey of a few weeks to understand that, of course, it's not scalable to cater to every single need. Especially nowadays, you have so many different working styles, teams, individuals that need all kinds of things. The second thing is also to acknowledge what I can impact and what I can't. And going back to what you said about the need. So we are a global company headquartered in Israel. For those of you who don't know, there's a 7-hour time difference between Israel and the United States, which means that a lot of, and by the way, we also have a lot of people that either report or definitely work with team members that are in different locations. Many of them are in Israel or other parts of Europe. So a lot of people start the day pretty early in calls. And when we started, we call it user voice, when we wanted to touch base with our employees to try and understand what's their experience, what they need, a lot of them described to us that they have a situation that essentially we start the day with calls, and then they need to commute to the office. And then the first like half of the day either is in calls or they need to commute, and then they come to the office, and then they need to spend time in a meeting room and do the calls, and then at some point it's not worth it for them to come to the office, which I fully understand and fully respect, and I think they're right. But to go back to what I said earlier is I don't think that that's something that I can solve for them necessarily. What I can solve for them is, what I cannot solve for them is for them to extract the value of coming to an office. And I realize that it's too big of a force for me to compete. And it's an uphill battle that I can't win eventually, meaning that even if now I magically create, individual phone booths to every single person in the office, if they don't have the inner desire to come because they don't feel that there's that benefit for them, for whatever reason, because it works for them, personally, because their apartment is too small, because their manager's there, because their direct reports are there. If that doesn't happen, then all the phone booths in the world won't help. And once I was able to kind of like offload that burden, then I started being more intentional and trying to look at the data and talk to people and finagle some kind of a reality that works and then needs to be reiterated. And if I take all that and get it back to the ground, what we really did is we got some phone booths for people to talk. But we definitely made a lot of changes, readjusted the purposes of rooms, and we keep reiterating, we keep going back to the configuration, we keep advocating for resources to make changes. And we kind of like try to manage a constant manageable deficit. And honestly, I think that over time I'm realizing that whatever we're doing kind of works, because the people that choose to, again, they feel that they benefit from coming to the office, they make the necessary adjustments. They do their Israeli calls on the days that they work from home. And then they load up the face-to-face meetings. And they've changed their behaviors, and things that they would have to do in a closed room, all of a sudden they don't. They do in the open space that you and I sat in today. And enjoy that it would be, and looked at the Hudson River. People changed their behavior and became flexible as we did, and we kind of allowed that.
While this question, both of you, is related to data, it should be very interesting to see different sides. I think you mentioned that this is how you actually look at the lost data ends in order to design what's next. Can you share with us what's data in the internet, how do costs correlate, and what the insights are you seeing?
Yeah, and it's not just how we design our next space. I think one of the things that most people maybe don't appreciate about working in a shared space like this until you actually experience it is how much care goes into creating the experience on a day in, day out basis from our teams. Like, we have amazing people on site who put this whole thing together. We have teams of people who are picking up furniture and figuring out what the right snacks program should be, and replacing the technology in the conference rooms, and figuring out cultural programming. And I think, I won't put you guys on the spot, but I think most workplace experience folks that I've spoken to can't always get the resources that they need internally or the headcount to be able to do this, even for a very large firm. And with a shared workspace, you have hundreds of people who are trying to create this great experience. And the reason is, yes, altruistic, because we want to create great experiences, but the most important data point that we get is that if this is not an amazing experience, people will leave. They have the freedom to just walk right out the door if we're not bringing our A game every time. And so, we are able to really harness that. And of course, there's a bunch of data that goes along with that before somebody leaves the space. We want to know, is it that, the technology wasn't working? Is it that there's one of our conference rooms that's underutilized because the furniture was not right and people don't actually need this layout of furniture? Is there, something going on with the coffee and people are drinking a lot less coffee? Oh gosh, literally this has happened. It's like, oh no, the new team member didn't know that the mix was wrong with the coffee ground stuff. So it really is not just sort of one specific metric I can point to, but just a mentality that we have around this whole, converged data set that's coming in every day that we obsess about in order to create great workplace experience.
And I think it would be interesting to hear what data how you disconnect now, and if you data change, how did it become this currency action? Let me say,
yeah, the scales are different enough that like so much of my data now is
it must matter.
anecdotal
Versus the experience.
And anecdotal, from the anecdotal is you get a little bit of like the stinky wheel feedback where like that gets sort of too loud. But I think right now, like a lot of what we're seeing is very much like how many people are in the office. We're small enough in the office that you can kind of just see. I try and get data from, we talked about badge data and like actual like how many people are around. And I'm trying to get data of how long people are spending in the office. Because I think in New York specifically, like there's a bunch of us that like show up at 10 and then we leave at 4, right? You kind of like are like leading the commute. In San Francisco office, that's not quite the case. First, because you paid for parking for that day and like you're gonna stay. You're gonna stay. But the sort of traditional like badge data, like MAC address, like a lobby, like that kind of data, but also how often people are interacting with us based on like the snack selection, right? Like, have we created something where people are like, man, like all of us hate this snack, like can you get something new? And as like much as I'm like, oh my god, this doesn't matter right now, it's like, yes, we will get you a new stack, because if I do that, you're gonna then tell me the next thing you need, and as long as it's not the same like voice every time, we kind of like keep like feeding that.
Snacks are critical. We have if you aren't doing the snacks right, doesn't matter what else you do.
Oh yeah, and like coffee. I think we have like 5 ways to get coffee at this point. Like I don't know. It's we had a mug. We had like a mug gate situation at one point too.
We have that too.
But we also, a lot of what I pay attention to and like I have my team pay attention to is where people are using the space. And sort of similar to what you're talking about, like all of a sudden people aren't sitting there, like why aren't they sitting there? But that, especially on the design side, because once you design something, like right, like that's it for the next 5 or 10 years. So really paying attention to how people work. Although I do find that eventually when you run out of phone booths, people just take the call at their desk.
Yeah.
And if you could like be the champion of that, I find that it does work though. I take a lot of my calls from my desk. And they might not like me for it. I don't know. We all kind of do. So the data right now is very anecdotal. Previously, like we were installing badge readers on like every co-working space that we had to try and get data. We also wanted to manage security, but like we really wanted that data of who's in. Otherwise, when we were renting these spaces and people think that no one's showing up in Paris, the answer is Paris shows up, but they all show up. And then they like work for an hour, they go to coffee for an hour, they work for an hour, they go get lunch. But like they socialize. Like that was a lost time. Like that was like exactly what we got that space for, was for people to be together. So it was fine. Not everyone agreed with that, but that's fine. Like, generally it was accepted. But speaking about how people work differently, like Hera's office, I loved to visit because it was great. Like they all wanted to hang out, talk, and like pass along ideas and like talk about things that they had read and other people that they had met at the company. Whereas like Munich was very transactional. Like you went in, you were quiet, you did your thing, and you were out. Sometimes actors went got beers, but like, it was being quiet. So that was very data driven. Like publishing those every month. I still do that. Another thing I carry over, I still publish that data because I want the execs to know what I'm going to do in the future. Like, don't want them to ever ask them questions about like why are you doing this. I just want them as my like engine out. But we don't ask questions, so I guess it works.
Any questions for the Balkans?
Yeah, I have like 7 million questions, so buckle up. We're gonna. I really appreciate the panel and the time, so thank you. One of the main questions that I have for you is kind of around managing up. So I'm hearing just a lot of really fantastic ideas of how to kind of manage either peers or down. But when you have some of these ideas, I'm at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in their ED&I team. I'm like 3 rungs up from the C-suite, but they feel very, very separate. We're a very established institution, as you may know, and so change takes a while. So how would you recommend kind of sharing some of the data or sharing, some of your, like, maybe like tester scenarios or like what you're trying to try on? Because I'm up against a brick wall of just like finances and basically nothing else. And so like how can I utilize my role and my perspective when I don't really have all of the managerial power?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
One of the things that work, what EAs make, it's like any EAs, they are amazing, right? They're like usually like very cool humans, but also like they're such a gate into the thought and feelings of their exec. So that was really helpful. And then also I did a lot of demos, like demo spaces, because I can't get the funding to do this big thing. But like, and the first few, I chose things that I knew, or I like really thought they were going to be home run. So it was like the phone booth, right? Like out were like, no one likes the phone booth, they get hot. So like, they like them now, because they don't feel like this was 2021, right? Like they don't feel like they're in danger. Like people love this out. And I said, let me just demo this at this place and like, let's see what happens. And they got like feedback. People were like posting in the Slack channel, like, thanks so much. And I tried to do everything super public, like as transparent as possible, so that it became a thing where employees were also then invested in like what workplace is doing, that we were working with them and not like doing things to them. And that's a big thing also on the IT side of my job is like, we want to work with you and not like be the team that does things and make your computer restart all the time. But that was like very much like the demos worked out really well, and it became this thing where all of a sudden we were like an org that was willing to think about things and think about like challenging the norms, and we had good ideas, these 3 things people loved, and it was a small way, but it worked out, and it was fun.
Cool. I can give you a data point that people have found very powerful in ERG groups and how important it is to build these communities. We made the decision a little while ago to try out and see what would happen if we took our own Tishman Speyer company ERG groups and opened them up to those of the folks who are in the building, and not in studio, but everybody within our large enterprise customers, our smaller ones, and it has been so powerful and so cool to see how that kind of cross-cutting community, people respond so well to it. And, they've told us that, this is really cool because it gives me a chance to like find other people who I feel community with and identify with. And it's outside the boundaries of my employment, and it gives me the chance. But importantly, it makes me feel more connected to my company. It makes me feel more connected to this space. And so we're going gangbusters with that because it's incredibly powerful.
That's awesome.
I have to stop for like no amount of pushing data for real estate or workplace I have ever found to land with the CMSOs.
Yeah.
The trick is to figure out like what is the dashboard that they're already looking at on a regular basis, and find the lever or two that you think you can prove that the space and the experience of the diversity programs move the needle.
Sure.
It can't be a push, it's got to be a pull. Get someone to be like, And one of the real unlocks for a lot of my clients now, we mentioned sort of the purpose of the office. Well, none of us did that before COVID. Like, why do you have an office in Chicago? You're like, because I have 500 employees in Chicago. Obviously. But now we're like, we want you to come in, and it was for what? It's not good enough to just say, I have it. There's a little game I like to play with a bunch of HQ purpose statements from the last couple of years. One is from McDonald's, one is from Google, and one is from KKR, the big PE firm. You cannot tell them apart because they're all like, to collaborate, which is not good enough. So the idea, particularly with your context, if you can craft a really authentic purpose for the building. So you always talk about, we're supposed to come in and be successful as individuals, but nobody ever holds the place accountable for anything. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different language with the execs. Right. The purpose of this place is to do so. In Bates case, it's like to make more people want to pay to be here. That's the purpose of this place. So people aren't paying to be here. It's failing. And then it's out about the people in the days like this whole thing is not leading up to expectations. And if you can get them to craft that kind of authentic purpose, then just imagine if every employee walking without were given a Uber 5-star rating. Not just like, did you have a good day? Like, did you, improve your ability to care for, to help us care for our patients today by being here? And if the answer is no, your case, result is probably not a design failure. It is probably the behavior of those very same people at the top we're going to try and get their attention to. Like you said, this place is supposed to make me see a path to greater care. And I didn't see that tonight. Why not? And to get them to do it, it's like, who goes to the event? Who was at the lunch and learn? Who was visible? I made the place to do the thing you said is important. It's not the chairs. Like, what are you cultivating to do? What's happening? And that may changes in behavior, maybe getting off Zoom calls, maybe getting out of the phone booth. It's like figure out what's on their dashboard and then get them to articulate what was the purpose of the box. And then they'll pull like that. That usually changes the night.
That's awesome.
Yeah. To that survey idea on the demo spaces, I had like literally like an iPad as you would leave, and it was like the airport bathroom. Like it was like that style. We like literally said how this go. But
And the second they see, we all know, you hit that 1 star button on Uber, like something happens and we'll get it linked. You hit that button, and the next day the share is different. They're like, ooh, like, okay.
yeah, I mean sometimes they were like, I didn't like that this room had a window, and like I can't change that. But
Goes back to control, right? What is in your
The
control?
software, your events that you make, right? Like you're like, ooh, Taco Tuesday, nobody shows up. Like, great, we don't. This is not a taco community. Fine, no more tacos. Like, whatever's the next thing, that change. What happens in the place can change much faster than the place can.
Right.
And that helps with the feedback. To your point. I mean,
Who doesn't like taco?
Correct.
Let me add one thing too to that, especially for the EDI kind of programming. I'm hearing a lot more in the diversity space, moving away from the cyclic business case scenarios that we're really used to more of a sustainable mission. And it's like being able to demonstrate, at the end of the day, it is dollar success for some of these, execs you're working with. So like, what are we saving? Like, I work with our disability ERG to develop a new product that ends up bringing in X amount of revenue. Or, we're cabinet supplier diversity program helped us, and working with women and minority owned businesses helped us save XYZ amount for the company. Just being able to even talk about the money implications of the work you're doing. I also came from, before Greenhouse, a 30-year-old nonprofit behavioral healthcare organization doing diversity work. And so if we talk about like uphill battles for change and all that good stuff, definitely saw that. The piloting demos that you're talking about absolutely worked. And to your point, you got to connect it back to what the execs care about. Like, what are you helping to solve for them? That's an issue that's pressing today. Some of that takes literally relationship building and just getting on their schedule with the EA, having the conversation, like, what's on your roadmap this year? How can my team, help to be of service to solve X? What are your problems? So sometimes it takes infiltrating with the system in a way to have them understand that this is actually an issue that you need, that is worth solving and worth investing in as well.
For sure.
I'd like to add to that, and could you back in there, but what you said, I think making it personal helps. Like, I don't know where physically they sit, if they're not in the space you manage and they can't feel the experience that you're trying to craft. If you can get them to physically be there, because it changes the perspective, and it also can create another opportunity for something which I feel is very important, is to diversify the voice of complaints that they hear, and it's that it doesn't just come from you. And I'm not belittling what we do. We don't just complain, but sometimes we try to paint a picture that is a picture of deficit, right? We're saying we don't have enough of. And I found that I was forced to be put in a position too often where they just hear me say, I need this, I need that, this is not working. But when I got the president of Wix visiting New York, and we did a happy hour, and he was having a drink, and then I was standing at the bar next to him, and then another employee came, and kind of like the Homer Simpson meme, I felt like they disappeared. They started talking, and all of a sudden, the president of Wix hears something from an employee, and it becomes a personal connection, and it stays. But that really resonates.
And tie back to the data. Last thing, tie back to the data we need to. If you have low leadership engagement scores, or like leadership isn't doing good on X, Y, or Z, it's like we need to see you at this thing to help improve these scores that you all say you care about so much.
That's where I'm at, girl.
Exactly.
Right now, I'm like, I have the pulse survey data. You're sitting on it? Like, what are we doing with this? Yeah.
Half the people don't know what to do with it. Like,
I think that's kind of, that seems endemic, honestly, but okay.
Thank you, everyone. And for this honest and non-physical question. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really wonderful.
Daddy, it's 1 hour. You're 20 minutes away. We're halfway there.